Hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Before we get started with our MB6 study design update, we would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where we work and live and pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. During this presentation, we will provide a quick overview on our MB6 project for new members that may have just recently joined us. From there, we will continue our discussion on the selection of stimuli used for the proposed study. Please keep in mind that all of the project details shared with you today are tentative and subject to feedback by potential collaborators on this project. There is no question that humans show an overwhelming proclivity for copying others, which underpins cultural learning and contributes to the enormous diversity of behavioral traditions observed across human groups. However, as many of you know, there is still a significant amount of debate on whether newborns and infants truly imitate the actions of others. As such, our leadership team, which consists of world-renowned experts on neonatal and early imitation, are now working collaboratively to explore this phenomenon through a MB6 project. For those of you who may not know, MB6 is a collaborative project for replication and best practices in developmental psychology research. Their projects are typically replications in the sense that they investigate a construct or phenomenon that has already been investigated in the literature and often is central to theory in that area. Overall, their goal is to bring labs together to address outstanding theoretical and methodological questions about the nature of early development and how it is studied. As mentioned earlier, upon examination of the existing literature on neonatal and early imitation, we find that there is a substantial amount of debate on whether neonates and young infants imitate the actions of others, with some studies finding evidence of neonatal and early imitation, while others do not. In order to make sense of these mixed findings in the literature, researchers in favor of neonatal and early imitation have put forth some criticisms pertaining to the experimental design and procedures used in studies that have challenged the existence of this phenomenon. Some examples include infant inclusion criteria, stimulus presentation and response period, infant testing position, maternal leave taking during testing, coding of target behavior, and model familiarity. With that said, what is the current status of this project? Fortunately, after several presentations, there are two items that the leadership team and collaborators have tentatively agreed on. The first is infant inclusion criteria, which pertains to the infant health, gestational age at testing, and arousal state during testing. The second item where there seems to be tentative agreement between stakeholders and the leadership team is the testing protocol and data collection method, which includes details on the infant testing position, the use of a spotlight, and video recording. With that said, the item of most contention has been which gestures to present to infants during the testing session. Initially, the leadership team presented stakeholders with two options, based on the existing literature on newborns and infants. These were tongue protrusion and sequential finger movement. As with other imitation studies, a gold standard cross-target comparison would be used to contrast infant responses to matching versus non-matching models in order to identify imitated responses. In this case, the frequency of tongue protrusion and sequential finger movement gestures would be coded. However, upon our first study design meeting, several concerns were raised about using these gestures for assessing the phenomenon of imitation in newborns and infants. With all that said, although the primary goal of this project was to explore neonatal and early imitation, in order to address stakeholder concerns, the leadership group is happy to first tackle the issue of whether there is simple matching of behavior. As such, the leadership group has created a new aim. In our current plan, we aim to explore whether 2- and 6-week-old infants match tongue protrusion and sequential finger movement behaviors using a cross-target approach at the group level. We will examine whether there are differences across labs, setups, cultures, and ages. If matching is established, we hope to look at matching of other gestures. Future studies can then follow up to explore the mechanisms that may underlie any apparent matching effects to understand if it is true imitation or some alternative, such as arousal. Since the project details are still tentative, we require help with isolating which 2 gestures we would like to use for this project. We've laid out a few options for you to vote on. Number 1 is tongue protrusion with sequential finger movement. Number 2 is tongue protrusion with mouth opening. Number 3 is lip protrusion with tongue protrusion. And number 4 is having 2 randomly assigned groups. One group focuses on tongue protrusion and mouth opening, while another focuses on index finger protrusion and hand opening and closing. Please use the link below to vote for your preference.